The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Andrea McMaster.
Hello everyone, I'm Andrea McMaster and we're glad that you could be with us today. The focus of our show is stem cell research, adult stem cell research, and the controversial embryonic stem cell research. There's been a lot of confusion in the public on this issue, and we hope that today the show can provide some answers and clear up some misconceptions. Recently, the University of Nebraska Medical Center hosted a mini med school where they shared with the public about their stem cell research there at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And today we have David Kraus from the University of Nebraska Medical Center and Dr. John Safranek. I'm going to introduce you first, a board member of the Nebraska Coalition of Ethical Research with us today. And we're glad that you could be here today.
Glad to be here, Andrea.
And David Kraus, PhD with the University of Nebraska Medical Center.
Happy to be here.
Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Share your title with the public here. We're glad that you can join us. I want to share here just a recent survey that the Omaha World Herald did. 22 out of 49 members of the 2007 Nebraska legislature answered yes in an Omaha World Herald survey when they were asked if the state should ban embryonic stem cell research. And I know that that really continues to put this issue on the radar screen, and people are talking about it in the public. A lot of people don't quite understand what they're talking about, though, when they hear stem cell research, and that really is the focus and the purpose of today's show. So let's begin by talking about what are stem cells.
I'm going to defer to Dave.
Okay, I'll be happy to answer. Stem cells have been known for a long time. They are cells that are capable of renewing their own population, in other words, dividing and giving rise to other stem cells. And then, on the other hand, they have the capability of dividing into different kinds of cells so that they can make many different kinds of cells. Stem cells are not all the same. They range from those that are very primitive that can make anything, and the embryonic stem cells fall in that category, to more mature that are somewhat restricted in what they can produce, such as adult stem cells, all fascinating cells that in the adult line I've worked with for a number of years.
Okay, well, you mentioned just one difference here between embryonic and adult stem cells.
There are many others.
But can you share some differences when we're talking about embryonic stem cells and adult stem cells?
Well, embryonic stem cells, as I'm sure everyone is aware, are derived from embryos left over from in vitro fertilization protocols that are destined for disposal or destruction. They are saved in that process to be developed into stem cell lines, which are groups of cells that are produced from those early embryos that can go on and grow in culture indefinitely or almost indefinitely. So they're very useful for study and potentially therapeutically, but certainly for study. Adult stem cells are derived from the adult. Generally, they do not form cell lines, although there have been some instances. They are used fresh when they're used, and they have less capability, although they do have some remarkable capabilities. They have less capability than those derived from the embryos. There are other types of stem cells, from cord blood, from placenta, newly described from amniotic fluid, each of which are probably a little different from the other, and probably somewhat, as we would say, hierarchically, in other words, ranked in terms of their capability to make different kinds of cells.
Okay. In your view, and I've recently read an article where you were quoted, embryonic stem cells can do much more than adult stem cells.
They are the only cells of those various types that are derived from the most early sources that have made no commitments. All other stem cells are derived from tissues that have made some kind of commitment to one of the basic germ layers of the body, to some tissue type, or what have you. And although we understand now a little more how to work with those adult stem cells, the embryonic stem cells are clearly the ones in the scientific community that are believed to have the greatest potential in terms of their ability to do different things. They are really blank slates.
Okay. And
could I clarify something here? Just I think it's a point that needs to be made. Because I think there's a misconception among Nebraskans, I've seen this among my patients, when they hear about the embryonic research, and that is that we have no idea whether or not the embryonic research is going to lead to any cures at all. No one knows for certain. There are very substantial problems. The scientists have no idea how they're going to overcome, or if they're going to be able to overcome them. And so I think this needs to be kept in mind. For as much promise as they have, we're not sure whether or not they're going to contribute any cures to medical science.
Okay.
Whereas we know with the adult stem cells are already being used, already curing diseases. But I think that's a distinction that needs to be kept in mind.
But there's also one difference here too, from understanding that adult stem cell research has been going on much longer than embryonic stem cell research.
But there are certain problems with the embryos. Animal embryonic research has been going on for quite a while. And it's very difficult to overcome some of the problems, such as rejection, such as the embryonic cells forming tumors. And whether these are going to be, they may be able to, we have no idea. Like I said, we may not, the embryonic research may not lead to any cures. And it's just, I think David would agree that scientists don't know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree that there's a great deal to be learned with embryonic stem cells that we don't understand. That's why we need to study them, is because if you think of adult stem cell research that began in the 40s and 50s, it took better than 30 years to come up with real cures that were widely used in the clinics. There were horrible problems with adult stem cells, fatalities, graft versus host disease, people didn't survive, and that's with the adult bone marrow stem cell population. So it's not that there were no problems with adult stem cells and it smoothly moved into clinical use. It was a rough time. Embryonic stem cells are really young yet in their study, only since 1998, since they were first described. So with only 7 or 8 years, 9 years of study, it's not surprising there are no real clinical applications yet. But the potential, which even John commented on, in the animal studies, there are great potentials that have been shown, and they have gotten around some of the issues regarding graft rejection and tumor genesis. Not all of them, but that's why we study them.
Whereas adult stem cell research has been going on 30 plus years.
Considerably more than 30 years.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what would happen to the embryos if they weren't used for this type of research. You're saying that the embryos that are used in the embryonic stem cell research come from fertility clinics, used
Right.
in the in vitro fertilization process. What would happen to those embryos if they weren't used for research?
I'll let John respond as well, but I'll just give you my shot on it. There's only one publication that really has kind of tallied up the number of embryos around, and it's now 2 or 3 years old, but it was 400,000 embryos frozen in clinics throughout the United States. They actually asked what was the ultimate disposition chosen to be of those embryos, and not all of them were set for destruction. Some of them were set for potential future reproductive purposes. In fact, a great majority were set for that, but many were set for destruction or disposal, and they would be disposed of. They're handled as medical waste if the family so decides. They could also be used for research rather than simply being destroyed, and many of us believe that it's a little better to gain something from them than to simply have them destroyed as medical waste. That is the option for some of them. Even if it's only 10,000 of the 400,000, that's a very significant number when we only have 22 lines that are currently functioning.
Okay, I'm going to let John comment here, but I just want to ask you one more question on this, because doesn't this type of research then, and a lot of people are asking this question, make a market for human embryos?
Not really a market. I'm not sure I can buy that. The decision to donate and the use of the embryos are completely separated by informed consent processes that are very strict, even now. It's the same informed consent process that led to the lines that we have now, which the Bush administration has approved. So if they were effective for that, we think that they're equally effective now. So I think it's important to understand that there's not really a commercial link between embryos and the research.
Okay, Dr. Safranek?
Well, whether they're slated to be killed or not is irrelevant to the moral issue. And that's really what we have to address here. And the question is, can we go ahead and do research on human beings merely because they're going to be otherwise killed? An analogy to this, in Germany in the late 30s, early 40s, there were citizens who were going to be killed. Some of the leading researchers, scientists, physicians in Germany thought, instead of just having these people killed without any good come of them, why don't we do research on them? If someone's going to be killed, we might as well at least get some use from them. We could use the same argument if someone's on death row. They're going to die anyway in a week. They may be human beings, but isn't it terrible that they're just going to be killed without any good coming from them? And so the same rationale that just because they're going to be killed it's okay to go ahead and do research on them, I totally reject. A further point here, which I think that university and the Nebraska Medical Center personnel have not been upfront about, is that part of the justification that is appealing is that, well, they're going to be destroyed anyway. The university now supports creating these embryos and then destroying them, and that's what the therapeutic cloning is about. And so the idea that, well, these are going to be destroyed, and so it's okay to be it's okay to do research on them. First of all, we don't do that with human beings, even if they're going to be killed soon. And second of all, I'd like David to explain why it would be okay to create these embryos through cloning. And
well, I'll be happy to respond. The issue of therapeutic cloning is a side issue that's directly related. We are restricted by our current internal policy. This is a university-derived policy that we cannot do therapeutic cloning. So it's almost a non-issue. We can't do it anyway. So there may be people who favor it personally for their own scientific interests, but it's not something we can do within the university. The issue of expanding the number of embryos that might be used for development of cell lines is a national issue. It's not just a Nebraska issue. It was approved last year by the House and the Senate, vetoed by the President. It's probably up for vote today or in the very near future. It's expected to be approved by the House and the Senate at the federal level, probably to be vetoed again. We don't know if it will be overridden. It is an issue that does have national prominence in terms of the number of people who support expanding the number of embryonic cell lines that are available for research, because the current ones are simply inadequate. And if it was okay to approve those first 78 cell lines, the only thing that is being asked for is the erasure of the August 9th, 9 o'clock, 2001 line, which the President established. So that's what's being asked, that those be allowed to be used from now.
See, I have 2 points. One, I was at the state legislature when Dr. Rosenquist spoke out against any laws that would ban cloning. And this was a change from the university's position a year or two earlier. So that's the first point, and that I would hope then that university, if that's their internal policy, that they would go ahead and support a ban on cloning. Then I don't think they want to, because they realize that they may need to do this later on, both to overcome the problems with rejection of overcome the problem with rejections, and also to generate more embryos. But my question, David, that I still ask you is, why is it morally okay to go ahead and create these embryos to then go ahead and destroy them?
Well, I'm not saying that it is. I really wanted to talk about the embryonic cell lines from IVF. I know that we opposed the bill that was going to ban all cloning. We actually opposed legislation in this area in general because of the issue of the nationwide perspective. We hire and recruit scientists nationwide. Many states not only don't ban it, but they support it with state funds and or otherwise support the research. We compete in that market. Our scientists see us as wanting to be able to do the research that is allowed even just a few miles away in Illinois. Not only just allowed, it is supported. We're not asking for state support in the research in terms of funds, but we're asking not to be banned from doing it when scientists and students who might want to participate in this kind of research can do it so nearby and have that choice. It puts us in a very bad situation. Right now, we don't have anybody who's proposing to do anything like therapeutic cloning.
I do want to move on a little bit. So I know that this is such an emotional issue,
Sure.
and it really is. I want to get to, though, I mean, what makes it so emotional? It's obviously because the question is where does life begin? And for some people, that's at conception.
Right.
And for some people, that's at birth. And so looking at using an embryo in research becomes very emotional. And I know that this is something that you've addressed before, David, and John, I'm going to have you speak on this as well, too. But in thinking about this, in this research that's going on, you see that there's a great promise in the embryonic stem cell research. Do you ever think, you yourself or your researchers, while they're doing embryonic stem cell research, are they ever concerned about, is this ethical, is this moral? Does a higher power approve of this work?
Well, I'm sure, first of all, the higher power part is going to be individual as opposed to a corporate answer. Individuals will take their own view on that. I'm sure they do think about it. I don't mean to in any way pass this off as a lightweight issue. This is a very serious discussion. I'm thrilled that we have a public opportunity to talk about this, because I think the people of the state of Nebraska and nationwide need to grapple with it and understand the issue scientifically and ethically so that they can kind of come to their own conclusions regarding it. There are scientists on both sides of it, and there are politicians on both sides of it, so it's clearly not an easy issue to decide. But we do support the idea that in light of the fact many of these embryos would be destroyed, and there's no question that that will happen, it is a matter of saving stem cells from a path of destruction for potential use, as opposed to simply disposing of them. And I really even take offense at the analogy to the Nazi experiments of World War II. I think that's a very poor comparison.
Oh, not at all, David, because the point is, just because someone is destined to die, you see, the whole issue, David, comes down here to what's the status of the human being, and that's what I hope you will address here, because the point is that you cannot kill human beings simply because somebody else is going to kill them. Just because embryos are going to be destroyed by somebody does not justify us in then killing them, or me going and taking them apart cell by cell. It doesn't do that. And so merely because there's a possibility of cures of great diseases, there are cures of great diseases in Germany, there are cures of great diseases all the time, but it has to be ethically justified. I'll give you an example of this. In the United States in the 1940s, the United States Public Health Service infected 300 people with syphilis. And the reason was because syphilis was a terrible disease. Wouldn't it be great to go ahead and be able to cure this, killing 20,000 people a year, as much as Parkinson's disease kills now? Affected 10 million people over a decade. Wouldn't it be great to cure this? Well, no, not when you violate human life, and not when you violate the basic tenets of medical ethics, which is what happens when you kill, or when you dismember embryos. And it doesn't matter whether they're doing it in Illinois. It doesn't matter whether the reputation of university is going to suffer. It doesn't matter whether we lose researchers. The bottom line is you can't kill innocent human beings, even if they're destined for destruction a week later, a month later, a year later. That's the fundamental issue, and I don't know.
And even if you're going to help others in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Is what you're saying.
Absolutely. In the syphilis experiment, they could have come up with a cure that would have saved 20,000 people a year, but that doesn't justify it. You can't violate human rights. You can't violate human dignity. And what university has never done, I've heard them on the radio, I've heard them down in the legislature, they've never said, what is different about the 7-day embryo that we can go ahead and destroy it, but we couldn't destroy a 1-month-old developing human being? What is about a 7-day-old human being and a 1-month-old human being?
I'll answer that right now.
Okay.
The difference is one is in the uterus and the other's in a petri dish. It's a very big difference. In England, the rule is 14 days in culture, and that's the end. It's not considered at that time the same as a fetus or an embryo that's in the uterus. That's a matter of definition, though. What do you consider?
And I do want to say, I know that you're going to disagree on this, okay?
Right.
And I don't want to focus so much on this because I think the public understands both points and both points of view right now. And it's really, again, that's something that people are going to have to make up for themselves. But I want to get back to some of talking about, and I know that you're very for this research, is adult stem cell research.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it being very promising and helping people. And let's talk about how that's helping people already and how we can see that that can move forward in helping people in the future, and talking about some of the new research that we've heard recently on amniotic fluid, umbilical cord stem cells. Let's talk a little bit about other research off the embryonic stem cell research topic now. So go ahead, John.
The organization that I'm involved with, we support all ethical research. Anything that's ethical. And what people have to understand is that the ethics trumps science. So that even with this syphilis experiment I was talking about, even if it could have led to a cure that would have killed 20,000 people, it doesn't matter because it wasn't ethical. So always any experiment that's done has to be ethical. We're in support of anything that is done ethically. Adult stem cell, so the reason we speak out so much against embryonic stem cell research is because it violates the fundamental tenets of medical ethics of not killing human beings, and it violates the fundamental legal right of a right to life, which the Declaration of Independence says we're all given, we're endowed with by our Creator, and also violates the fundamental political principle of equality. We can't treat human beings differently than other human beings, unless you can come up with some sort of a justification, and location doesn't really count. They take fetuses out of wombs and operate on them and then place them back in and be born. Just because they're pulled out doesn't mean that they're not a human being at that point. The bottom line is they're human beings, they're endowed with the right to life because they're human beings, and that can't be violated. That's why we speak out against this. We would be speaking out against the syphilis experiment. We'd be speaking about what happened in Germany. We'd be speaking out against any unethical research. We're for any research that is ethical.
Would you like to see more funding for the research, like umbilical cord stem cell research?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it would be great if universities said, you know what, instead of doing research on this divisive, contentious issue, what we're going to do is we're going to become the center that figures out how to manipulate these adult stem cells so that they can be used for all these different diseases. We're going to be the ones that do the amniotic, that make these discoveries with amniotic fluid, that show how research that we have no problems with, that no one disputes. That's what we would like to see the university do. Instead, they've chosen to do research on embryos, and so that's why we're opposed to it.
Let me kind of come back on the same point.
Let's talk about some of the adult stem cells and the promise there.
Stem cell scientists don't see this as an either-or issue, quite frankly. Very, very, very few of them. Medical Center already is internationally known for its research in adult stem cells. We have an international reputation in that area. It is the same scientists who want to do embryonic stem cells. It's not a different group. It's not as if they want to bring in a group of folks who are just going to do embryonic stem cell research. Indeed, nationwide, people who do adult stem cell research, many are also doing embryonic and umbilical cord, and probably now amniotic fluid stem cell research.
Because they're seeing the promise with adult stem cell research, and they think, why not try it in other areas?
That's indeed the question. We have umbilical cord researchers, we have adult stem cell researchers who work in a variety of different areas and are internationally known, and we happen to have 2 projects going with embryonic stem cells. The reason is that people do see the potential for curing some things that there's been no evidence that adult stem cells can even address in the slightest. And that's one of the reasons why embryonic stem cells may have potentials that adult may not. I don't think anybody in the stem cell community thinks that one kind of cell, adult or embryonic, is going to cure all diseases. It's not going to happen. It's probably a long ways off for many, and embryonic stem cells may address only a handful. But if it's the right handful, it could make a world of difference for many, many people with chronic illnesses.
Can you share some of the hope that we're already seeing with this type of research?
The adult
stem cell research?
Sure. Adult stem cells, probably the most impressive to me are the recent studies with cardiac work, not only in this country but abroad. And there are a number of clinical trials that will be going forward, if they aren't already, using bone marrow-derived stem cells to treat heart disease. Now, one of the questions is whether or not it's really stem cells that are causing the effect. It probably doesn't make any difference. We know that there are some positive impacts from these cells, but it may not be stem cells. But if you're helping a person, maybe it doesn't make any difference whether it's actually the stem cells or some other population that's present in the injection, so to speak. That's definitely been a forward-moving area. Lots of areas for metabolic diseases and congenital diseases are potentially treatable. Some are already being treated by using adult stem cells or cord blood stem cells, which are very, very similar. So they're great potential. I think cord blood stem cell work should be funded to the hilt, and likewise with adult and probably amniotic derived.
There was so much publicity when we heard amniotic fluid and using those stem cells could really, really help, and possibly was listed that maybe this will stop the embryonic stem cell research in some of the areas. The reason they were saying this is because they were seeing just, some will say, equal promise from amniotic fluid stem cells to embryonic stem cells. What would you say when you, it's been talked about so much this past week that I know that there's been a lot thrown out there.
I read the paper in Nature Biotechnology when it came out last week, and it was out electronically first. It is an impressive paper, but it's one paper. Science works by a process of confirmation and replication. It's the way we've done it. All science works that way. I do expect that the findings are good. It's from really good groups, Wake Forest and Harvard, and they're good people, but it's one paper. It didn't actually show functional use in the animal model part of it. It showed functional use in tissue culture, which is much easier to attain, and it showed at least the presence of the cells in transplantation in the animals. Great prospect, but it needs a lot of work to bring it up to the level of saying it's going to replace other areas that have shown a great deal of promise.
The big question, too, is that when you're hearing this thrown around, a lot of times it's, oh, well, this doesn't really affect me. And for both of you, I know that you want to say this research does affect you, whether it doesn't affect you now, but it should affect you in one way or another. How would you answer that question?
Well, what it does is the embryonic research that they're doing at the university, it cheapens the value of human life, and it calls into question the fundamental right to life in our society. I find it curious that, David said that the location of the embryo makes a big difference. And my question would be, well, if we could grow the embryo to 14 days, 21 days outside the womb, we're able to develop the technology to do this, could we experiment on a 21-day-old or 28-day-old embryo? This is if it's not in the womb.
I think it should be absolutely disallowed.
Why?
Because I don't think it should go long. First of all, I think you get trilaminar differentiation at 14 days, 10 to 14 days, so you begin to get the nerve tract form beginning, first layers of cells.
Yeah, all you're saying is that the human being is developing at 14 days. You got nervous differentiation. At 22 days, you're going to have a heartbeat. How does this make it more human? I'm as human now. I'm the same human being that I was when I was an embryo. If I do if as a physician, I go ahead and do x-rays on someone who's pregnant with an embryo, and the embryo ends up being handicapped because of this, I can be sued because I injured that human being. I injured the human being when that same human being was an embryo at 7 days or 10 days. Before you said the location made a difference, now you're saying trilaminar differentiation makes a difference.
I'll take issue with your radiation effects, first of all.
If I give a medicine that harms the baby at 7 days.
You know what,
Okay.
we only have 1 minute
Okay,
left,
good.
so I'm going to let David wrap it up since you just had it.
Well, first of all, I think you can see that there's a gulf between the two ends of this, and John and I will probably never agree on the basic aspects of how we consider human development, what we consider about it. And that has split this country. It really has. It's been close to 50-50, and depending on the poll you read, it swings a little bit either way. I think public discussion is critically important, especially those that allow learning.
Right. And right now we're seeing Iowa, one of the few states, right, that has a law that prohibits embryonic stem cell research.
They're one of 6.
Okay. And then our state legislature, it's before them whether or not they should ban this type of research. So this will continue. So we're grateful for the discussion today, and thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And thank you for joining us this week on Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.